Well, hiya, BookTube. Bill Ruttenberg here with the Ruttenberg Library. Wanted to do a June wrap-up for you. As many of you know, I am a school teacher, so during the school year, my monthly totals for the months of, September through May don't always get to be very big numbers. They're usually, 4, 5, 6 books. But when I hit the summer months, June, July, and usually August, those months, the numbers of books that I read are usually a lot bigger numbers. And so I wanted to tell you about my June reading month. And I finished 12 books this month. Now, a couple of these were carryovers from May, but that's okay. So if you want to stick them on the May, that's fine too. But I think the majority of it was in June, the majority of this. So 12 books in the month of June. So the first one that I finished up, and I actually started this, like I said, in May, May 26th through June 2nd, I read a memoir by Larry McMurtry called Books. And basically, this is Larry McMurtry's book life. Very short chapters, 2 to 4 pages long, and it just goes through his life as not necessarily as a writer like you would expect, but as a book dealer. And he's got lots of small stories in there about the different people that he came across, different bookstores, how the industry has changed from when he first started to now. Interesting book. And this was actually really good to sit by the nightstand with the really short chapters because, if you get really tired, you can put it down and you will be at the end of a chapter. You don't have to worry about finishing in the middle of a chapter. So I'd recommend it. It was interesting, especially to all you book people out there. All right, so the next one that I read, and I don't have a copy of this because it was from my local public library, but it was Lincoln and the Fight for Peace by John Avalon. And this was a brand new book that had come out, and I had started this back on May 21st and finished it June 4th. But it was just like the title says, Lincoln and the Fight for Peace. So the book really centers around 1864 and 1865 and bringing the war to a conclusion and trying to not only just stop the fighting but bring the nation back together and the different things that Lincoln had planned to do that. And the very last part of the book, it gets into the idea with the death of Lincoln, how detrimental that was to the United States when we headed into Reconstruction, where Lincoln probably was the only guy in the nation who could bring both sides together. I don't know that it'd have been perfect, but he would have done a much better job than Andrew Johnson. I think everybody can agree to that. So that was a good book. The next one on the list that I finished, I read from June 3rd to June 6th, and this was for our reading event for the month of June, June on the Range. And I read The Stalkers by Luke Short, and really good Western about, what was his name? Marshal Tim Sefton. And let me just read the back to you real fast. He swore he'd flush Junior Constable's wild bunch out of the country. Then Junior bushwhacked him, leaving the marshal bleeding in a bucket of blood and forgetting his mission. But Junior remembered, and he and his boys would finish the marshal off unless he snapped back to his senses and strapped on his guns. And basically the marshal, they waylaid him and they thought he was dead, but he comes back, has a little bit of amnesia, and then he has to go hunting down the gang that was after him. Really good book. Very fast read, fast paced, just like most Westerns go. All right, the next one that I finished off, and I read this from June 2nd to June 7th, and this was Whispers of the Gods, Tales from Baseball's Golden Age, told by the men who played it. And this was put together by Peter Golenbach, who is a sports writer who did lots of different interviews back in the golden age of baseball. And he had all these interviews laying around, and he basically compiled them into a book. And so you get just the idea of what baseball was like and some of those old stories from players from the 40s and 50s primarily. Some of it goes back to the 30s, some of it goes into the 1960s, but primarily the 40s and 50s. And I just thought it was excellent. I absolutely love reading about that time period. Matter of fact, my book that I picked up yesterday that a lot of you recommended to me was Summer of 49 by David Halberstam. And this was sent to me, and I am really enjoying this. I sat down yesterday for an hour or two and read 63 pages of it right off the get-go, and it's dealing with that golden age there. So I love reading about that. And so that book from the library, Whispers of the Gods by Peter Gollenbach. Good book. I'd recommend it if you're a baseball fan. The next one was Vineyard Enigma, and this is just basically another Martha's Vineyard mystery. I had Steve Donahue sent me a whole box of these from the Brattle bookshop, and I was really appreciative of that. But March got busy and I didn't get to them. I wanted to read them all in March. That was my original plan, and I did not, but that's okay because I knew last summer I started going through these and I'd read them in just a couple days. And so basically I picked up from where I left off last summer instead of in March, and thoroughly enjoying these. I read actually a couple of them this month. I'll get to the next one, but this is kind of neat because the ones that he sent me were signed copies. So signed by the author, Philip R. Craig. Most of them were. So that's pretty neat. But enjoyed this book. It's about a guy from Africa who is trying to hunt down some African artifacts from, I believe it was it Mozambique? Let me check. This is a couple weeks back. I can't remember. Anyway, it was from East Africa, or Zimbabwe, excuse me. Is from Zimbabwe, and he's hunting down these artifacts, and there's people who come up dead along the way, like they always do in the Vineyard Mysteries. But J.W. Jackson, the main character's got to solve the crime. He's asked to come in and help consult on finding the lost art. So that was a good one. Highly recommend that. The next one on the list, again, another Western for June on the Range. This was Max Brand's Steve Train's Ordeal, and really like this. Steve Train is a young guy who tends to get in a lot of trouble. He's good with a gun, and he's asked to deliver some money. And throughout the whole book, it basically plays on his conscience. Is he gonna do the right thing and give the money to who is owed, or is he going to try to keep the money for himself? And along the way, he crosses and double crosses a few people, and so anyway, that's the extent of the story, and he ends up falling in love along the way. And so that was a good one for June on the Range. And the next book, I read this from June 20th to June 22nd. I had to wait. This was a delayed read because I got it for Father's Day from my girls. And this was John Grisham's new book, Sparring Partners. Now, of all of John Grisham's books, this is probably on the lower end. I did not like this one nearly as well as I've liked the others. It's 3 short stories that he came up with, and I left a comment with one of my viewers, and I told them, and I'll tell you now, the short stories, the novellas, they felt like incomplete stories. They felt like stories he was going to try to write a full novel on, and then he just ran out of juice, and so he wrapped them up real quick. Or I just did not enjoy this one nearly as much, even though one of them is a Jake Bridges novel, and so that kind of disappointed me. The Jake Bridges wasn't a bad one, but it felt like he wrapped it up real quick at the end because he was running out of steam, is what it felt like. But anyway, I'd probably still recommend it. I just wouldn't give it a very high rating. I do like John Grisham enough that I would recommend it, but definitely towards the bottom of his fiction. So next one on the list is another Philip R. Craig, Martha's Vineyard Mystery, and this was Vineyard Stalker. And this is all about a story of the character, give me 2 seconds, guy known as the Monk, Roland, and he lives on some some land there on Martha's Vineyard that the rich people want. He lives like a monk. He lives in basically a hut and lives very, very simply with no electricity and that kind of stuff. And he's just trying to stay on the down low where nobody can notice him. But he's got, like I said, a lot of rich people who want his land and want to either build on it or extend their yards. And so they are causing mischief on his land, doing various things, and he needs the mystery solved. Basically, his sister asked J.W. Jackson to come figure out who is coming onto his land, who's stalking him, who's doing all this evil stuff, and of course, a dead body comes up along the way. And so that is basically what the whole story is about. Next on the list, another book I don't have in front of me. It's in another part of the house, but it's called Family Life's Art of Parenting, Aiming Your Child's Heart Toward God. And this was a parenting class that my wife and I took through our church. And we were just looking at, just different advice on how to raise kids and do it in a godly way. And so we read that from May 7th through June 25th because we went every Saturday and covered a chapter in the book, and it was really good. We had a lot of great discussion with other couples that were in the church or in actually surrounding churches, and just how we raise our kids, how do you discipline, how do you just stuff like that. And I would recommend it. The next one on the list. The last three here is another June on the Range book, and this is again by Luke Short. This is Bounty Guns, and I love that cover. That's a pretty cool cover. I like these vintage covers like that. But anyway, the main character, and his name is, and I always forget their, let's see, what is his name? Oh, Tip Woodring. He's asked to come to this town. Sorry, I didn't mean to kick the camera there. He's asked to come to this town and try to find a killer and bring somebody to justice and solve an issue that's in this town. This town has two families that are like that are feuding, and he has to, in the mix, try to figure all of that out. And he gets put in as a deputy sheriff, and so he has a little bit of law enforcement on his side to help him solve some of the problems, and he makes a lot of enemies along the way. And there's a love story involved there. Good story. The next one that I read from June 24th, and I finished it, should have finished it June 30th, but we got busy with stuff and I just didn't get it done. So I finished it the next day on July 1st. The Best Team Money Can Buy, the Los Angeles Dodgers, Wild Struggle to Build a Baseball Powerhouse by Molly Knight. And basically this tells the story of how the Dodgers rebuilt themselves back in the, 2012 to 2015 is what the book covers. Primarily the 2013 and 14 seasons, but it goes back to 2012 and then kind of goes ahead to 2015. And just all of the money that got poured into this franchise, an astronomical amount of money. Like they were spending buku bucks and trying to buy a baseball team. And that's not always what it's about. And they started finding that small market teams were beating them out. And so just an interesting story. It does a good job. The author does a good job of telling the story of the individual players on the Dodgers team, Clayton Kershaw and players like that. And so I found it interesting, and it was even more interesting for me because in my baseball watching as an adult, I have a hole in my watching it's probably when I started teaching, actually. When I started teaching here, 2006 to about 2014, I have this big hole, this big gap in my baseball knowledge, where we had a lot of young players who came in during that time who are now the studs in the league, and I didn't know any of them. It was almost embarrassing because they were talking about this loaded team, and I'd only heard of like two of the players. So I learned a lot there. And last but not least, as far as books that I read, I finally finished up on the 4th of July, the morning of the 4th, Gone with the Wind. And I have been reading this forever because I'd read, 150 or so pages and then I'd put it down, and I was trying to wait for my daughter Crimson, because we were supposed to be doing a buddy read on this, and she skipped out on me a little bit. And so she's still in, there's 5 parts to the book, and I think she's in part 2. So I got tired of it, and I powered through it. I'd read, 150 pages, and then I'd skip a few weeks, and then read another 150, skip a few weeks. So I started this clear back on February 18th, and like I said, finished it on the 4th of July. It is a massive book, 1,024 pages, but very, very interesting, and I hope to do a book talk on this, book chat on this, and I'm probably going to do it in 5 parts, because I've got some discussion questions that I found online that I'm going to use to try to help guide the videos, and I'm going to do it one for each of the parts. And there was some stuff I liked about the book, and there's some stuff I really don't like about the book. It did get me interested enough to read the sequel, Scarlet, but Scarlet was not done by Margaret Mitchell. It was done by another author in the 1990s. But Gone with the Wind, if you're not familiar with the story, it takes place during the American Civil War and then in Reconstruction, and it's from a very southern point of view, from a family from Georgia. Scarlett O'Hara is our main character, and Rhett Butler's our other main character. You get a nice movie picture there on the cover, and it's about their relationship, and there's some other characters that play big roles, but I'm not going to get too much into it because, like I said, I'm going to do some book chats on that. But I got it done. That's the big thing. It's one of the chunkers that I've always wanted to read and get it off my list of books to read, and I knocked it off. So, BookTube, that is 12 books that I finished in the month of June, or primarily in the month of June, I guess. And so, what books did you guys finish? Did you get a lot done? Were your numbers high with summer being here? 12 is quite a few for me. I don't usually read that many, but it didn't hurt that, June on the Range, these are, 150, 200 pages each. Yeah, they're very short. And so, you can knock these things out in a day or two. And so that helped my numbers, but I also had a big one. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this. Like I said, tell me what you got read, BookTube. I don't know how your weather is in your part of the world, but we finally got rain. We've been waiting on some rain. I know my garden was wanting it, and I'm tired of carrying water out to the garden. Cooled it down a bit too. It's been in the 90s. Last night we went to dinner and it was 97 degrees on the way to, and then my wife had said the heat index got clear up to 106. I don't know if that was yesterday or the day before, but it felt like 106 degrees. So it's been pretty warm. We've been staying inside, which is one of the reasons I've gotten so many books read. But anyway, hope you're all having a good time, good week. Had a happy 4th, and until next time, happy reading.